Hello, hello, hello. Good evening and welcome to ROX Box. It's been a while since we've done a Saturday night special guest, but I felt that this was needed. I felt that this was the time to do this. I've been hearing so many people either through face-to-face conversations, through Facebook, other platforms about the welfare of our children through this situation, through school, education. And I met these two ladies properly last year at the Healing Weekend. They were two great people who entertained us and kept us company at our stall. Needless to say, they went away with a couple of bags. But we formed a good bond, and it was really nice to see them participate on the virtual weekend this year and also throughout Oasis. And it was through having a Facebook chat with them that I found out that they have extensive knowledge with this category. So I thought it was right to invite them on here. It's not spiritual, but we're going to bring a bit of that in here, but it's certainly well-being. So it fits in with what we stand for 100%. So if we're all ready and we're all comfortable, then I would invite you all to welcome the lovely Jan and Addie to the screen.
Hi. Hiya.
Oh.
Switch that one off.
Brilliant. That's it. That's that gone. If one is beautiful, then it'll be fine.
Leave it over there, and then it won't interfere. With a bit of luck and a few prayers.
How are we?
We're fine. A little bit short on time for finishing off some of the slides on the PowerPoint, but we'll go through.
No problem at all. So, we just want
I'm Jan. She's Addie.
If you just want to start off by introducing yourselves and give yourself a little bit of background info.
Yeah. What we're going to do is we're going to do that via the PowerPoint, because otherwise there's too much to faff around with, and we don't need to faff around with stuff.
No problem.
What we've done is we've created a PowerPoint so it's easier for people to see the info, absorb it. And every so often we're going to be saying to Dan, right, Dan, come on in with your bit, crystals, dowsing, whatever's going to help parents, children, young people cope with the scenario they're in at present. Because we're all about well-being, all of us, and well-being is mind, spirit, and body. And you've got to have those things working. If you don't have those things working, then you don't have cognitive functioning. And so the kids and the young people aren't going to do so well, and neither are the parents, to be quite frank. So that's what we're looking at. Every so often, when we have the breaks with Dan, that's the time when he'll say to me the questions that you're asking. And it'll either be Addie or myself that'll be answering. At some point during this, Ocado's doing a delivery, so I will disappear for a very short while. And we do have two Labradoodles that may also require attention. So we're going to see how we go.
That is absolutely fine. This is live, and it's in our comfort of our home. So, you know, we're going to, once I did Development Mondays on a Monday night, and I'd do card readings. And one Monday, it was so hot in the living room that I situated myself in the hallway, and I had the door open, the front door open, to give a bit of breeze. And we were expecting a crystal delivery that day, but hubby said the delivery service stops at 6. We'll be fine. I was there full into giving somebody a reading. This guy turns up, knock, knock, knock. Got a box for you. I'm like, I'm doing a meeting. I've got 15 people on. So absolutely, these things are here to test us. But
Exactly.
yeah, if you guys have got questions, or if you need any recapping or want to go in further with anything these ladies say, when that time comes, I will go through those questions for you. Okay?
Okay. Ready
Brilliant.
to start the PowerPoint, folks?
Absolutely.
I've got to find it on the screen. It's a chance. Okay. Yep.
They haven't got the screen.
They haven't got the screen yet. Hang on.
How did you share it?
I will share screen. Hang on. Yeah, there we go. Wrong thing. We're trying to get it to show the screen. I had this beautiful a minute ago.
There we go.
There we are. Miracle. Miracles of science.
Am
Right,
I okay to drop down and let you ladies take over?
Yep.
Have a good one, and I'll be back up shortly.
Okay. Right. Just getting it so we can see it ourselves as well as what you're seeing. Basically, mum and daughter, you can guess which one was which. We're wellbeing researchers and holistic educational specialists that also specialise in specific learning difficulties, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and all that. Various qualifications, not going to go into them, but you can see there's a fair number that support our work. Going to use some terms. When I was speaking on Oasis last week before,
I think it was when we were talking to Dan.
or even into Dan, people weren't sure of what the terms meant. So rather than you thinking, what the hell is she talking about? Here are the brief ones, yeah? Special education needs, usually is called SEN. Learning difficulties, physical impairment. It's also gifted and superior intellect, yeah? Genetic syndromes, specific learning difficulties, and other. And I'm putting in OCD because that one's going to cause problems in school under the COVID systems, yeah? Theoretically, every SEN child and young person is entitled to support. Doesn't always work that way. Partly because a school has to find the first 6,000 of SEN provision. Schools don't have money. They don't want to commit that money to having an ed psych assessment. Without the assessment, you can't get the next level of provision, and so on and so forth. Okay. Other terms that we're going to be used quite a lot is SpLD. The top three, dead easy. The dis means problem with. Lexia is text. Calculia is number, mathematical concepts. Praxia is to do with movement. So it's little movements, big movements, eye movements. Then you get to the three that are certainly likely to have problems under the new COVID regs. And that is attention deficits. They are daydreamers and they ignore risks, lose concentration, have an awful lot of energy, disorganized, focus on things they like, going to find some of the routines they've got to follow under COVID really hard. Language impairment is what you hear, say, write and understand. Auditory processing disorder, you can hear okay, but you don't understand what you've heard and read, and difficulties in learning phonics. Autistic spectrum. Under that comes autism and Asperger's. Oh, Asperger's, they don't really favour the word anymore. Hans Asperger was the person that discovered it, but he was in Nazi Germany at the time. Everybody thought, he was saving all the people that had this condition, but he then sent a whole load of other children to the concentration camps. So people have rather gone off the term. Problem with social interactions and communications, rigid thinking, limited range of imaginative activities. So their play is quite odd. Might just play with the wheel of a car. I know one that only likes to eat yellow things. That can be difficult in life. Right, what are we? Have a quick read of that blurb as much as you want. You can just look at the headings. Basically, we're both researchers. We've covered a huge range of things in both our research and our studies over the years. If you look at the Fulcrum Academy book, you'll see the Fulcrum Academy brown text that we created for home education. to design programs to achieve well-being, provide school reports for home educators. And if you look to the one just above that, the green one, you'll see Next Generation Publishing, and the second line says medieval whodunits. This I do in my spare time, of which I do not have a lot. They're going to be on Kindle, and I'm also going to start reading them via webinars because I do short stories. Interests, mine at the bottom, alternative and complementary medicine.
They can
therapies.
see where you're pointing.
There you are. That's easy. You can see where I'm pointing. Yes. Into tarot, used to do readings for friends. If you look over to Addie at the bottom, you'll see she's got a really wide range because she's really into the holistic education side of things. So she's got a wide range there of things that she really likes. Runes, definitely. Runes and crystals definitely are in. Right, how can we achieve well-being? What we know is COVID's created educational uncertainty. We don't know whether we're coming or going. The parents don't know it, our kids and young people don't know it, and the teachers don't know it. There came out new advice for the teachers yesterday evening, and the school's going back on Monday. This is totally unfair on everybody, but it's an ever-changing scenario. And so that's really going to create problems for everyone. Now, lockdown been negative in many ways, but it has produced some positive stuff. Parents have tried out home educating. Various studies have done. Now, one shows improvement in behaviour and attention. That's with the young ones. Fewer tantrums. Every parent's glad about that. But they're under less stress. They're under stress, can't go out very much, but you're under less stress because you haven't got to try and get out the door in the morning in a rush, remember everything, then you go remember where you're meant to be at school, etc., etc. University of Bristol has done a survey. They found 13 to 14-year-olds were less anxious than they had been in October because they were doing regular surveys. Yeah?
Now, that said, Mind, Young Minds, which is the organisation that works with children and young people who are already experiencing difficulties with stress, anxiety, they found that anxiety levels did go up, but they only went up a small amount, which was a relief.
So now we're at the scenario where our children and young people are due back to their education establishment, school, college, uni. Parents are now looking at their options for how to reduce their family's stresses and so achieve well-being, but they're having to do it against a background of COVID-19. And as we said before, this is mind, body, spirit. We have to think of a lot. Oh, sorry, this is so wordy. It gets easier. They predict COVID's going to last 2 years from now. The other long pandemic we have is the 1918 Spanish flu one. That lasted 2 years. This one looks like it's going to last a bit longer. It's going to be into 2022 that we've got to think about. The second wave is starting to hit. South Korea is running out of sick beds. France has just seen a huge rise in illness. I think it's about like 2,000. UK winter death prediction, this is a government one, is 85,000. I've seen another figure of 81,000. We really don't want to go there, so we've all got to do our bit to try and reduce the chances of us getting it. Vaccines, are they the holy grail? Unfortunately not. They're unlikely to go through their usual testing because they're trying to get them through so fast. Now, Addie, you did some research on vaccines ages ago. How long does it usually take to get a vaccine through?
It depends. That's the problem. Normally, you're not talking about 6 months. That's really a no-go.
Something like 2 years, isn't it?
It
More
is,
like that.
because you've got to go through so many stages, including checking it's safe with each of the demographics to ensure that it's not going to cause harm to one group more than another.
Now, there's a vaccine being created at Oxford University. They've done the research, or they've reported the first part. I think it was 11 monkeys. They all got it, but they didn't have the lung problems. The government will want this one because if we don't have the lung problems, we don't have to go on ventilators, so the NHS will be put under less pressure because somebody on a ventilator has to be made into a semi-comatose state. They have to be turned regularly. It takes a team of at least 4 people to do that. And there are major, I've just gone back a page, Addie. There are major, hang on, gone back 2 pages. She altered it. She pushed the,
I did go back.
thing.
You've gone.
There are major problems if you've been on ventilators or been in intensive care. If you've been on intensive care, you can get a condition which affects your heart, which can cause early death. If you're on a ventilator, for every day you are in intensive care, that's not even on a ventilator, but just in intensive care, for every day you're in there, you will have to have a week of recovery. Commonly, people are on those in intensive care for 13 days. Parents, think to yourself, if my child is in intensive care and we've had a whole load go into intensive care, how do I take a third of the year off work to look after them? Immunity will only last a few months. Now, the immunity, I keep going for the wrong ones, don't I? The immunity so far is between 3 and 6 months. A lot of it seems to be about the 4 months, which is worrying because it's not going to last very long, this vaccine, if it does work in the first place, because a lot of people don't even have immune cells once they've had it.
One of the things with flu and with colds, we all know we get them over and over again every few years, if not every year. And it's because the particular immune cells, the antibodies, they develop at a different length of time depending upon the illness. So some illnesses, once you've had it once, that's it, you're not going to get it again because
Like
your
mumps.
antibodies will protect you. Others, you lose immunity over time. And we know this happens with vaccines as well, and you can have it checked with the common vaccines. MMR, you can go in and have a check to see whether you still have the immunity you had at that time. But with flu, with coronaviruses as a whole group, they are more likely to fade. The immunity does
Within
fade
a few months.
really within only a few months.
Now, another issue, there are more than 2 forms of COVID-19. You can recover from one, and then within a matter of just a small number of months, 3 to 4 months, you can be ill with another form of it. Oh joy. Who's at greater risk? I will stop doing that in a minute. Who's at greater risk? Right, Addie's disappearing to see to the dog. These are the people at greater risk. Now, you can see that it's various conditions. Men are overweight, really that's a no-no. You can see that black children appeared to become seriously ill more often than white ones. Now, the Birmingham Public Health Director in June was saying, oh, black children aren't going to be at more risk. We know this. And this research has come out literally just this week, showing actually they are more at risk. So that's a real issue for a lot of people that have a child that is of a different ethnicity. We're not even sure about what happens with children that are Chinese extraction, children that have an Indian heritage. There's a lot we don't know. Age, unfortunately, you can do nothing about your age. But what we do know is there's something called NOD, which is a chemical which is produced in the body, your immune response, and it comes from the cell walls of your arteries and veins. As you get older, you produce less of it, so your immune system is affected and becomes less effective. One of the things that can actually improve that is a treatment in a far infrared cabin, FIR, far infrared. We happen to have one, and you can also get far infrared arcs, which go over the body. They are very expensive, but they are useful, and they also strengthen the walls of your cardiovascular system and your heart. Okay, so they've got a use. The problem with all of this is it's getting access to the things you need that are going to help, and some of it is not cheap, but dealing with COVID isn't cheap either, as you'll find as we go through. We have a great deal of conflicting information. There is nobody's statistics that you can really totally believe. We're never going to know the true data for the number of people that are ill and have died, because at the beginning of all this, GPs were actually told not to put it on death certificates. We've got a scenario, and now if somebody's got another condition, they might not put that they actually died of COVID, but they'll put the other condition down, so we'll never know. We'll never know the incidence because we didn't start testing for months. No one started testing for months, so we're never going to know the incidence truly globally. We know Spanish flu killed 50 million people, or affected 50 million people, so it was a disaster. This most probably in the end will be the same, We just have to keep our death rate down. But as you can see here, 2 bits of information within 3 days of each other. That's the UK Office for National Statistics, and that's a government study published in the British Medical Journal. Who do you believe? Health of children. Do you believe what you're being told? This is reported by the BBC. 13-day-old baby with no known underlying health conditions has died. And that's NHS England saying it. Over here we've got healthy children do not die of coronavirus, and only those who were seriously ill before caught the disease are at risk. Who do you believe? And that's the problem for parents, and it's a problem for teachers and educational staff. It is a nightmare for everybody. The only thing you can do is look to see if you can see other information on the net, which is what Addie and I do. If we see one piece of statistic or one comment, we then look and see if we can find an opposite one, to then see which do we believe, which is the most credible. And then go for gut instinct in the end. The 2 problems of COVID that are not really talked about very much are what happens afterwards. Remember, I've mentioned if you're in intensive care, you've got a problem because you can be long-term care needs because of each day that you're in intensive care. But you've also got 2 conditions that people aren't talking about. One is PIMS. It's associated with COVID-19. They didn't admit that for ages, but they have now. You usually get it under 5, but I think I know of a boy that got it at 14 and died with it. Serious inflammation throughout the body. Now, serious inflammation throughout the body happens with adults, and we call it sepsis. And that's one of the causes for death with COVID. With PIMS, it can spread to blood vessels. If untreated, can cause tissue damage, heart damage, organ failure, or even death. It's not that common. Look, we've only had about 100 so far, but it's something you need to be aware of because you've got to be able to recognise it. So if a child has a temperature of 38 or higher, cold hands and feet, and is sleepy, get help instantly. If symptoms persist and you can't get help, take them to the A&E. Yeah? And look what they've said. This is the website of the Royal College of Paediatric whatevers. Yeah? And they're saying, trust your instincts and seek help. And that's what you need to do. Parental instincts are often right. Long COVID can last for months, and they're worried it can last for years, like ME can.
We don't know at the moment. All we know is that a lot of people are developing long COVID, and so far the symptoms aren't subsiding for a lot of those people.
ME is a post-viral condition. Post-viral fatigue syndrome is known, and it's known that you get it after a virus. COVID's a virus. So you get that. Do you then recover after a few months, or do you go on to something worse? UK MPs have just issued a report, and they said there's 16 common symptoms. They can disappear and then reappear. Look at the list. This is not good.
The one that's going to be the most impact where school is concerned, though, is at the very bottom of our list, the cognitive problems.
Yes.
Memory loss, brain fog, confusion.
And if you go back into school, and this is teachers, please note, if you've got a young person that seems very disorientated, you know, your first instinct in the past would be, what have they been sniffing? What have they been doing? Now you've got to think of long COVID.
And you have to think that it may not change, that you may be having students who have symptoms arise and disappear over time, and they'll need additional support. And adjustments may need to be made in the classroom for these needs, for the difficulties that they're experiencing. Yeah, I mean, right now there isn't any guidance on that. That hasn't been part of the government's guidance to schools, and that could be an issue.
Just think of also the effect of, for a young person, with hair loss. Think of the bullying that can then ensue. Whole load of issues here, whole load of issues, and exhaustion. That's why you know it's post-viral fatigue syndrome, because you've got that exhaustion. If that carries on, you can then go into ME. And in fact, the main government medical advisor to President Trump has actually stated that he thinks that there's a risk of it becoming ME. So it's a really, we know a lot about ME. It's what we have to deal with a lot. You really don't want to go there. So you don't want to get it in the first place. That's the trick. Don't get it in the first place. And we're going to tell you ways to reduce your viral load. If you reduce your viral load, then there's less chance you're going to have it. And if you do have it, less chance you'll be severely ill. Right.
However, the thing to note is that the symptoms from long COVID are not necessarily associated with people who felt severely ill when they experienced the illness.
Even
itself.
those who had it mildly are having long COVID. And they think there's about 500,000 people in the country with it already. There's Facebook groups for long COVID if you want to look. Right. We've said at the very beginning, parents are faced with choices. There's 3. And what you got to remember is the educational decisions that are made now don't need to be permanent. You're not saying I'm going to jump off this cliff and if I can't swim, the sharks are going to get me. You can say, right, let's try it. Let's see what we can do. You can change your mind at any time. 3 choices: stay at school. There are ways to minimize risk. We're going to go through them. And there are ways to enable the child, young person to cope with the ever-changing new normal, a more rigid than usual environment due to COVID. Next choice, online education. Can be expensive, but requires less input by parents and guardians and home ed. No COVID risk. Curriculum and methods of showing knowledge may not be as flexible as you need.
But one of the benefits of the online education is they already have systems in place for things like exams and making sure they're graded fairly, and so you won't get the same concerns when it comes to the point of SATs or GCSEs, where you're really not sure how that's going to be handled by the government and by Ofsted.
If you return into school, because what some people do is they do a little bit outside of school for a while, then they go back in, and that's fine as well. And that a lot of people do that, so they go back in for the GCSE years. So they do all the home ed up to then, and then the kids say, oh, I think I'll go back in. Yeah. Home education, it can be combined with online, legally allowed to do it. That's the place where you get the deregistration form.
Essentially, it's very simple to do. It's simply a matter of going to the website, downloading the form, filling in your details, and then that, I believe it's just handed in, or
you just get it to the school. I'd hand it, and I'd get someone to hand it and make sure, and I'd get someone to sign that they've received it. Some people say, well, you know, if I do this, how's everybody else going to react? What's my family going to think? What's my friends going to think? And the trick is, you just say, during lockdown, we tried home education, and it works for our families, so we're going with it. You don't have to say any more. Just say it works for us. We're going to try it.
And again, this is something where you can try any of the different options. You can try going into school and seeing how that works, and if you find it's too much pressure after a few months, bearing in mind we're talking about potentially 2 years of difficulties or of awkwardness and changing scenarios in the school environment. So it may be that for now it's fine, but when winter comes and there's more lockdowns or there's alternative strategies being used by the schools to manage the COVID risk, it may become more overwhelming at that point.
Remember, schools have been talking about, the latest advice from the government is saying there's 4 tiers or 4 stages of what we do in schools. One of which seems to involve, if there's lockdown in the area, that you go in for either 1 week and then about
it's
9
5 days
off.
on, 9 days off, because you've got the weekends plus the weekend.
Or you can do 2 weeks in and 2 weeks out. How are you going to do that for your boy? I do not know. So that's one of the big problems I think about school at the moment, especially if you've got kids like those who have dyspraxia, those who have ADD, those who are in the autistic spectrum. They like pattern, they like regularity, and doing one thing and then doing another, they're going to find this stressful.
And not knowing, because one of the biggest problems is they're going to be changing things as the local lockdowns occur. So you have to stay really on top of whether your area is being affected right now.
And it can happen overnight.
Yes.
Right. You do not need the school or local authority's permission, but it is a bit more complicated if there's an education, health and care plan. They used to be called statements. And it's for children and young people with complex needs. It usually will state a designated school, so that's why you've got to. There's a different letter actually on the deregistration place that you can send in for that. If change your mind, you may not be able to get back to the school that your child was in or the same form group. So that might be a problem. So you've got to think of that issue. But my bit of advice would be, if your child is unhappy when they go back and they don't settle quite quickly, then really consider alternatives, because it won't be getting any easier for a while. It will stay at that level of difficulty or might get worse if there's lockdowns.
Especially over the winter. There are a great deal of concerns about the impact over winter and what people are going to have to do to manage those risks.
And to the teachers watching, my heart goes out to you. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to do. I think trying to keep children and young people in the places they're meant to be is going to be exceptionally hard. If you have a young couple who haven't been able to see each other during lockdown, or somebody who fancies somebody else and hasn't managed to make it to the couple stage yet, you're going to struggle to keep them apart. Same goes for people with close friends. Same goes for people, a lot of schools are doing it, so they've sort of made these wonderful bubbles, and they're bubbles in the playground too. And if you're used to playing by the shed, and that's where you've always gone for 3 years, and now you're told that's not where your bubble goes, some kids really won't be happy about that, will feel stressed automatically. So the bubble's going to create problems as well as solve problems. The latest thing that came out from the government on Friday evening was your bubble can be any size. Some secondary schools are having bubbles of 150 children, in other words, a whole year. And if more than 2 children have it in that year, they're going to say the whole bubble goes home. So you need to know what your school's doing. Now, it's interesting. I've only did it 2 days ago, but I looked at 2 Somerset schools. One tells you what it is doing, and the other one does not. One says there are bubbles in their school transport, and the other one says there isn't. So you've got to look and see what they're all doing. And it's not going to be the same anywhere, I think. At least with home ed, you can choose your COVID risks, and it is recognised as being successful. Universities like it. Stanford University, very keen on it in America, produces independent learners, and it also gives you very flexible. It's flexible in the teaching methods, resources used, the curriculum, and how you show knowledge. School is quite text-based. Yes, there are drawings and diagrams and other things, but there is a lot of text. And usually for this child, young person, show their knowledge, that's also predominantly text-based. You can actually do it so there's very little text at all. I taught a young home education student Pride and Prejudice by watching the series. It was Colin Firth one, needless to say. And she learned the story that way. And then she decided, I didn't suggest it, she decided she was going to write the story via captions. And she literally sat there, watched the whole series, taking screenshots, and then she wrote 1 or 2 line captions underneath each picture to explain the story. By the end of that, she really knew the story. Reading Pride and Prejudice is hard work. There's hardly any dialogue. So that was a splendid way for her to learn. And you can do that with anything. You can do the story of Mary Poppins. You can start off with looking at Mary Poppins, and then you can say, well, where do the penguins live? Which Antarctica or the Arctic, you know, and what are penguin suits, tuxedos, you know, and you can go from there. You can go wherever you like. You can go to magic. You can get all sorts of things. That's the flexibility you have with a home education curriculum and with the material. Hang on.
Yep, we've lost
She's
a bit
done
of
something
light.
with a bit of light. You've pulled the cable out the back, so it won't be happy.
And now
Don't worry.
it's not
There you
the
are.
camera.
I knew it was. That was the
There
power
we
cable.
go.
So you can do wonderful things with home education. It's fun, and you can use such exciting things that you want to do.
But since we're going to talk about that later, I think maybe we wait until the later bit for that.
Making the choice. Have to involve the child and young person. I don't care what their age is. You have to involve them. What do they want? What do they need? Can you achieve what they want and need? Do you have other people to consider? This could be granny that needs to shield. It could be a sibling that needs to shield. I know the government says nobody needs to shield at the moment, but how confident do you feel about that? Can you and your family cope with all the complexities and uncertainties surrounding attendance at school in a COVID-19 world? We're going to look at some of those in a minute. Support for making a choice. And this is where, Dan, you'll see this pretty top there, which means Dan's going to get involved. Basically,
but if we just say what the lower bit says first, which is
get in touch with your intuition, because often you've got to do this by gut.
We can discuss
and
that in a second.
that's
what I'm saying is the research information.
But you can also research information. Your local authority will have it under the term elective home education. Online is education otherwise, is one of your best sources. Books, fabulous book, How Children Learn at Home. Talk to people who have home educated or have been home educated, to your child, young person, and use social media.
There are lots of Facebook groups that you can look at, and normally they're in your area. They're local Facebook groups, so you can talk to the other parents in your area who have been home educating their children.
Right, Dan, your turn.
How are you? All good? We've got some amazing questions, guys. So I'm looking forward to when we've got that to put these questions there. But yeah, we have got the spiritual connections here. So if we've got people here who are into dowsing, into using a pendulum, we can use these tools to help us feel our intuition, really allow us to feel comfortable with making these choices and the choices that the family together are making. We've got crystals here. Crystals are great, and throughout lockdown, throughout all of this, I've been inundated with questions from teachers. What crystals can they have in the classroom to help with the children? And parents, is there any crystals I can put in my children's bag or pockets while they're going? And throughout the night and through home. Now, for me, if there's any children that are going back to school, rhodonite and fossilized wood would be my two choices to send your children with. These are gentle, grounding stones. So if they've not been back at school since before all of this, and they are thinking they're going to go back to what it was before, rhodonite and fossilized wood are going to give them that gentle grounding and that support. So when the teachers go, no, you're going to be in this bubble and you're going to be on this table, it's going to cushion that blow for them. Really great for that. If you've got any children who are losing sleep over this, if they're anxious, bring in the cool, calming, coloured crystals in. Blue lace agate, blue calcite, manganese calcite, those nice pink, soothing crystals that are going to just allow them to feel calm. Take out those stresses. So we could bring them into their rooms. We could put them in their pockets, put them somewhere if they're old enough, put them somewhere where if they feel that anxiety, if they feel that stress that's coming, that they can pick up that stone, hold it, and just rub it and allow them to just calm their nerves down, because bless them, they are going to be going through a lot, and there's a lot that they're not going to be able to take in. So they're my recommendations. Over to you guys.
Right, you've also got, if people feel that tarot works for them, they can actually cast a tarot. Same with rooms. Meditation, yoga, they're also really helpful to calm everybody. Okay, you can get into a ritual of doing these. You know, we do this every night, every weekend we do this. Friday evening when we're all stressed, do that and then watch a comedy and have some fun, or go for a run, go and play in the play park, find one that nobody's at, walk the dog, run with the dog, especially if you've got an ADD. One of the other things you can do if there's sleep problems, the smell, certain smells help, and one of them is vanilla essence. So you could put that on a tissue and just put it under the pillow. Works for dogs, I've also found out. For parents, you can have coffee and vanilla. Very effective, just the smell. So coffee essence or the oil of coffee and vanilla. Very effective. Because the more things we use, the better chance we've got here. This is not one thing fits all. Yeah, it's what works for you, what works for your family, what works for your kids. Right, on we go, folks. Oh, you want questions? What are you going to ask me?
Absolutely.
20 minutes in.
So,
I think we're going to have to
Sarah
zoom a bit
Matthews.
faster. We can't see the questions behind.
Okay.
So Sarah Matthews,
Do the schools have all this information?
Unfortunately not.
she put this question to us when you were looking at the PIMS and the long COVID.
Most probably not. So it's really important that they do know this information. They're getting a lot of stuff from the government on how to social distance, that sort of thing. They're not getting this. We spotted this was going to be a pandemic at the end of December, because I happened to come across an article by a Wuhan researcher, medical researcher, who admitted there was a problem. In China, you don't admit there's a problem unless it's a disaster. And so we reckoned there was going to be a pandemic, and we've been researching ever since. I read online newspapers. I read at least 6 every day. Addie, from January onwards, was looking at the English translations of Chinese newspapers to find out what was happening in China and Wuhan. A lot of the things that our researchers are coming out with now, we knew in February from the Chinese researchers or the South Korean ones, for reasons that are not understood. In the UK, we don't seem to like to publish the research from other countries, certainly at the beginning of all this. And we
certainly don't like to accept it as, if not statements of fact, then even indicators, because things like the government was telling care homes that it wasn't easily transmittable within care homes, and yet all of the data coming from other countries was indicating that there was going to be a big problem with care homes. And even if you don't want to 100% commit to the other countries' data, at least there should be some recognition that there is an unknown there. There is a concern, and until we know more, we can't say with certainty one way or the other.
And the other thing is, we've got porous borders. 1918, when the Spanish flu hit, hardly anyone travelled. 1968, when the Hong Kong flu hit, not much travel. Nowadays, everything's travelling. All our goods are travelling. They now know that they have found coronavirus on frozen goods. And how long does it last? Like
3 months.
3 months. What do? How do we keep on? We bought some frozen chips from Ocado. They're arriving now, and we're actually thinking, do we just put them in the bottom drawer for 3 months and then eat them? And if you look in the UK at the moment, I think in England at the moment, there are 40 food processing plants with large numbers of staff, 70s, hundreds of staff, that have got it, and they've had to close it down. They've all handled food. It stays on plastic for 4 days. Everything's covered in plastic, it seems to me. Remember, your clothes are plastic if you've got polyester. So, do they know all this? No. My 15-year-old son has ME, has stolen his childhood.
That's from Louise Beale.
Louise, I'm 71. My ME started when I was 18. I'm very lucky. I've only had it mild with the occasional moderate and just one brief severe. Addie started it when she was 5. She's had it for over 25 years and has had a severe form for over 20 of those years. It is very misunderstood. There is hope in the ME community that because they're going to have to do research on long COVID, they will start to be more sympathetic to ME, both social services, educational and medical.
And they may well find something of use for other autoimmune diseases like ME, because they're looking.
Very much so, Dan, very much so. And also, remember, COVID is neurological. ME is neurological. That's why there's this big fear that people that don't recover within a few months after they feel that theoretically no longer infectious will go into the ME.
Normally it's 6 months that is the transition from being termed post-viral fatigue syndrome into something longer term, such as ME or the alternative term that's sometimes used, which is chronic fatigue syndrome.
Chronic fatigue syndrome is actually diagnosed as just having 6 months of fatigue.
And it also doesn't have neurological symptoms.
Correct.
That's one of the clean distinctions between the two.
What's happened in the UK is they've merged these things together, which makes it very difficult for everybody. It's not merged together under the World Health Organization classification, but it's convenient for a lot of professionals for it to be merged. There are already GPs that are not accepting that long COVID exists and are telling people it's all in their mind. The only hope we have is, I don't know how many of you watch those two brilliant doctors that you see on TV, Chris and
Zander. Van
Tullochen. And they do lots of programs and lots of research. And Zander has got long COVID. And we watched the program documentary about a week ago where his brother, who is a specialist in immune disorders,
in infectious diseases,
who actually had to watch him having his heart restarted twice and was in tears. Because he's based at a university hospital, there is a chance that that hospital will do a lot of research. How's this going to work? Is your employer's not going to let you have time off? Yes. Some of my friends have sent letters to the school to register and homeschool. They have complex needs. Yeah. If they haven't sent the letter that is the one on the home education otherwise, get them to have a look at it so they can see what they needed to say. Yeah?
Just in case they've missed any
got
of
the right word
bits.
All right, because, and if they've got complex needs, if you want to get in touch with us, we didn't have to put our contact details anywhere, but Dan knows them. Then we can help you design programs. We do tutoring on the program, and we design programs that work, that are fun to do. There's nothing worse than
and we also provide the equivalent of a school report that can be shown to you get someone who comes out and does just a check to see that you're actually educating and that it's not just that you're not doing anything at all. So we do reports which look at the things you've done, regardless of what they are, because a lot of learning can actually occur from experiences that we don't think about. And so one of the things we do is write reports that puts that learning onto paper so that you can actually show to someone, we watched this program and it was fascinating and we learned these things from watching this documentary together as a family.
And what I do is I put them into the educational context. So
use the buzzwords.
History, you've read Pride and Prejudice, you've actually looked at Regency history. And LGBT, you've watched The Importance of Being Earnest. Again, let's have the same person, Colin Firth, because that was a good version with Judi Dench as the dame. So cooking, well, now you've done maths because you've looked at a recipe and you've halved it. You've worked out what the measurements are, and you know now that 400 grams of flour, what it looks like, what the mass is when you see it in a bowl. Birmingham Hospital have been told work on it being like this for 18 to 24 months. Yeah, what I've been saying, and it's what they're preparing for, so should we. Well, I know, folks, Dan has got a fantastic crystal ball. So all I can think of is you say to him, look in your crystal ball, Dan, because
give us some hints.
Go on, show us that crystal ball. Have you got it there? It's massive. It's a massive thing.
It's outside, unfortunately, ready for the full moon.
But quite honestly, you can't prepare for some of this. And the children, young people that have the conditions that deal with, they can't cope with change, like the dyspraxia, the attention deficits, the OCD, Tourette's, and the autistic spectrum, they're going to have an awful job. Right, my 10-year-old daughter's school have agreed to still provide learning remotely for her. Brilliant. Due to still shielding for my son. Wonderful. Praise them. Tell them they're wonderful. Send them in a bouquet. Send them in some hotel chocolate chocolates. Make a good relationship.
The positive dynamics wherever you can find them.
Yeah. My daughter is also being assessed for ASD and has ADD and anxiety. I don't think she would actually cope. No, I'd agree. So,
yeah.
As long as they're doing it remotely, wonderful. As soon as they say they can't do it anymore, home ed, online ed. Yeah. Just get her out of it. I think you have to work out what is right for your child and family.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And when you've got grannies that need shielding or grandpas, then you've got to work it for the extended family. Yeah.
On the other hand, you'll also have families where it is really important that both parents can go out to work, and so the kids are needing to be in school. And then there are, as we said, we're going to discuss very soon, hopefully, because we are running out of time, surprisingly, what things can be done to minimize the risk so that it isn't a big pressure, it isn't too intimidating to face.
Or you could see if gran, auntie, uncle, they could look after them and home-ed them, and you'd have to shield them perhaps because they're older. You know, if they're like me, ancient, then yes. Homeschool is best for my niece being, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I actually recommend, if the school has not managed to meet the need for whatever reason, then that's the way to go. I would love my kids to go back to school for the socialising aspects, a sense of normality. It scares me that my kids' schools can't control head lice, so I'm not heavily confident with the worldwide virus. See your point. Actually, in school, hardly any socialising goes on.
It goes on in the breaks, and even then,
if you're not having a break at the same time as your other friends, then you're not socialising. And if you, and in the dinner time, it's all going to be staggered, and you don't get that much time anyway. And if you're kept in by somebody, which is dreadful, then you get even less time. I can give positive feedback on using singing bowls and aromatherapy on children with autism and anxiety. With crystals, I use rose. Absolutely, rose
lovely,
quartz. Wonderful.
Yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah, we've got a rose quartz heart that's around all the time at the moment. Next one. I find each school is doing it different. Having children different schools, nightmare. Somebody has just said, what happens if school A is in lockdown, school B is staggered, going in and out, and C is doing something else as well? Or one of them gets it in one school, and I've got to quarantine everybody else for 14 days. This is just impossible. Schools don't even have a full understanding of full-blown ME or ASD, never mind non-COVID. Yeah, that is the problem. We can't blame the teachers in some ways here. They have a national curriculum that's hell, quite frankly. I mean, we're teaching things that are quite boring in many ways, and we're not teaching the breadth. I was saying to Dan earlier, LGBT, every secondary school kid, certainly from age 13, if not younger with some of them, should watch the film Milk. It explains how the AIDS crisis started. It shows where the AIDS quilt came from, and it shows the horror of AIDS. People were dying within 5 days. That's why they didn't have a diagnosis. 5 days of getting a symptom. That's why they could go out and march. They didn't worry about leaving somebody home to look after them. They were going to be dead. 5 to 10 days was the norm. I watched a program after Milk. I watched a program with another student. There was a documentary, 4 people that were involved in the AIDS crisis. And 4 different types of person. One was a nurse, and one was a florist. And I thought, what goodness knows, why a florist? And he said at the beginning of it, people were buying bouquets. Quite quickly after that, all they could afford was a single flower because people were dying so rapidly, and their whole communities are being devastated. So, you know, we can do that in home ed. We can watch things. We can get our young people to understand. Going back to LGBT, fascinating day held in our local library last year that gave us the opportunity to talk to people that are trans. And I was horrified. We spoke to 3 people that have been in the armed forces. And I sat down and said, can I ask you questions? And this lady said to me, yeah, and all 3 of them, you know, very happy to answer questions. And I said, when did you know? I said, I know somebody who is gay. And he said he knew at the age of 5. I said, when did you know? And this lady said to me, I knew when I was 3 years old. And at that time, because my family was in the forces, I'd been sent to a boys' boarding school. And she burst into tears. It was still that horrific. And that lady was what, in her 60s? Yeah. So we can do those things. Teachers don't have as much freedom as you have if you're home educated. Right, my son is starting a new school. He has got SpLD, hypermobile. Often that's with dyspraxia. Often the dyspraxia might not be recognised, but the dyslexia is.
And sometimes the assessors can't actually cover dyspraxia because that's assessed by a medical professional.
Could have language problems there as well. Often goes with dyspraxia. And we are still on assessments for ADD, so we have no rapport with this school, and the information has not been passed on properly. This happens. There are some excellent teachers out there. In every profession, there is excellence.
There's excellent head teachers. There's excellent upper management.
Yeah. There are also, as in every other profession, there are also those who are not. If a child is lucky, it gets one of the good ones, one of the excellent ones. Adrienne had dreadful experiences at school because she went to a primary school where the deputy head did all the assessment, and she couldn't even realise how intelligent Addie was, because Addie was actually been assessed as gifted, and she couldn't see the specific range of difficulties, they didn't exist. So it's luck of the draw. Some schools are running out of hand washing things. Yes, this does not surprise me. The cost of COVID is enormous for the schools and the parents. This is not being looked at properly. All the schools are going to have increased budget for the PPE, personal protection gear they need, equipment, and for all this hand washing. How can you socially distance if you're all standing side by side at sinks? Where are you going to put all the paper towels? How are you going to afford all the paper towels?
Yeah.
There's a massive issues.
We're nearly 1 hour in, so I think if we...
But
that's all for the questions at the moment.
Right, we can go on then, folks.
So I'm going to dip down and keep up the good work, ladies. Loving it.
Lovely. We need to go back to there.
Click on that.
And click on that. Okay.
And if we drag it across again.
And we drag it across. No, that. Am I in? Am I not?
Yeah, you're fine. You're sharing it. So.
Right, we're sharing. Okay. COVID-19 is asking us to jump through hoops. The hoops are getting bigger and more fire around them. And sometimes there's a tiger coming the other way, I think. So, more rigid environment won't suit a lot of kids. OCD, ADD, Tourette's, autistic spectrum, dyspraxia, and language impairment. Increased stress as everyone's having to jump through these ever-changing and unpredictable hoops. Changes at short notice. We thought it was 2 a.m. this morning that the government gave it, but it was actually last night.
We're not entirely sure when. No one said exactly when it was released.
So you never know when a lockdown's going to come. I've got to do this faster.
Left click.
Thank you.
Just left click.
Right. Stresses that can exist at school. Now, these are at school before we had COVID. For some kids. Some are getting bullied. All sorts of reasons for that, not going into it. Pressures. I've got the March here because there's a huge thing of time, deadlines, being in the right place at the right time. Then you've got interpreting instructions, memory, personal space. Instructions, auditory processing disorder, ADD, Asperger's autism. Asperger's, you have to say, Andrew, please do this. Because if you don't say Andrew,
explicit.
Then how does he know it's for him? Personal space, dyspraxia, autism. They like bigger space than normal. You know, me doing that, they're actually going to like social distancing, but they'll get really uptight if people don't do it.
And if people don't follow the other rules, such as masks, that sort of thing, where appropriate.
Some of the causes of stress and anxiety at school are SEN, SpLD, needs not being met. Gifted and superior ability, needs not met, bored may lead to behavioural problems. They switch off or just play up. Personal stresses, loss of a close relative. We're going to have people dying, and we have had people dying. Or they're worried someone's going to die because they're in hospital or in intensive care. Dirty environment. You know, we're now going to be obsessed with hand washing. OCD, that's an obsession anyway. Other reasons, curriculum and or teaching resources methods don't suit. This is what COVID actually looks like. It's called coronavirus because it's a crown. That little wiggly bits, the red bits look like crowns. So we've got struggle to cope with changes. This is the child, the young person, and educational staff. And as I say, you have my utmost sympathy. Teachers, educational staff, this is going to be a minefield. And again, think of those things that Dan was saying about relaxation, rose quartz, all those things. You're going to need all that support. Do a meditation, do a yoga, watch humorous films at night, do anything to just chill. Masks and social distancing, there's big issues there, and bubbles. Then the lack of certainty. There's no normal anywhere. It's not just school, it's on the way to school, on the way back to school. There's fear.
It's even the shops, because so many kids used to go into the tuck shop.
Yeah.
The nearby shop, grab some sweets on the way out of school.
Yeah.
Everything has rules now and new structures that have to be followed.
And schools have closed their tuck shops.
Yeah.
So, you know, things are not going to be the same. You know, even the fact that they're going to have packed lunch now. Attendance, anytime, it could change. Exams. How do you actually get a somewhat difficult student to even want to do any work if they're in year 10, 11, when they know exams may not even be marked.
Or that what comes out may be completely different from any expectation.
I mean, some of them might feel, well, let's just write different grades on pieces of paper, throw them up in there, and we'll catch one. Because that's what the mutated algorithm did. And how can you have a mutated algorithm? The only one I know is Ninja Turtles that mutated. Fear. 75% of people are asymptomatic, including the children. This is adults and kids. So you don't know who's got it. In school, is the transport safe? Is school safe? That's the fear. What are the risks of catching it, dying from it? Then we go to a nice thing called PIMS and long COVID and ME. Stress or outcomes. Now, this again is what can we do? How can we reduce fear? Dan, can you come in here?
We are, if you look at the time, we're an hour in. So.
I've lost him. I've lost him completely now.
Down there.
There?
Try that one.
That one.
There
right,
we go.
Dan, what can we do for fear?
Fear?
Yeah.
So with this, again, it's bringing in those cooling stones. Black tourmaline would be a nice one.
What about depression? When they've got depressed?
Depressed, we need to uplift citrine, orange calcite, sunstone. Bring in the oranges, bring in the yellow colours. They're what makes it smile.
Yeah.
When you hold a piece of orange calcite, you can't help but smile because it's sunshine in a stone. You just uplift. You automatically just go, ah.
There's also things like the essences, Bach's Remedy, your
Bach flower remedy.
Yeah, Bach flower remedy. You know, that can be had literally a couple of drops on the tongue. Or even
rescue
put it on the
remedy.
wrist. Rescue remedy.
I always put it on the wrist for me. I put it on one wrist, rub it together as the only way, because then you don't get the necessary alcohol intake of a few drops of alcohol.
Yeah, if you've got ME, can't tolerate alcohol because the liver's compromised, so that's a good way of using.
Yeah.
That's
and the alcohol evaporates, so you don't absorb the alcohol side.
Okay, move on. I'm going to
press that first. 10:30 last night.
One of my
Thank
friends.
you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Down to there.
Okay, I'll drop that down.
Okay, right. Is it transmitted in school? Well, it's transmitted in lots of different ways all over the place. These are the ones you've got to think about. The key, reduce the viral load you meet or that you have on your body. The reduced viral load means that you are less likely to get it or you'll have it more mildly. And that's what you want to do, all right? So this is how long it stays
on different
things. 72 hours on plastic and stainless steel. Polyester cloth is plastic. Most of the children's uniform is plastic, therefore, so we can say that there's a good chance it will last for many hours on their uniform. Copper, 4 hours. Paper cardboard, 24 hours.
And that's the school books they're bringing home and the things they're having to work with for homework.
Yeah, files are plastic covered. Yeah. They're plasticized. We're not going to look at how those figures from that research compares with the fact that the wonderful plague ship, the Princess whatever, that was stuck in Japan for months after everybody left, 17 days later they still found
RNA
of COVID. They still found particles of the virus. So, toilets. It's found in feces and urine. That's one of the ways that SARS, which it's got part of, is embedded in this, actually spread from one tower block to another through the sewage system that came up in the shower. Somebody had an open window and the wind blew it to the other tower block. Unfortunately, a lot of schools or some schools may not have a lid to the toilet.
A toilet seat lid. Or the kids aren't used to always putting the toilet seat down. And it's when the lid is up that the water sprays outwards. The micro particles, you know.
Don't really want that shower.
It's not what you really want.
Right. Cell phones carry 10 times more bacteria than a toilet seat.
Yes.
Disinfect with 70% alcohol. I suppose you could.
An alcohol wipe.
Yeah, alcohol wipe. You could.
You don't want to just pour alcohol in these things.
I suppose you could put vodka on a tissue and see if that might work. I don't know. But the trouble is, you see, phones have got glass and steel and plastic.
And the part that makes them sensitive to touch can be badly affected if you use the wrong stuff. So always look for the proper wipes for computer screens.
And tech stuff. Can travel 5 meters. That is 16 feet for those of you that work in old money like me. That's a long way. A teacher projects their voice. Some of us teachers can project our voice from one end of a hall to another. And as we do that, if we have the virus, it will go all that distance. Even outdoors, they found it travels this. Teachers project their voice in a classroom because if they're talking quietly like this, nobody can hear them. So they have to project. They're having kids sat in rows in front of them. They're not doing what they used to do, seating in rows. This is especially in primary. They're not in little groups, and they go around the group and they talk about the bit they're doing and give them the help and support. Can't do that. You're in rows and columns. Different form of teaching. There's going to be a lot more raised voice because you've got a projector. So what do we do there? Masks can protect. This is a Chinese research. Man infected 13 people via air-conditioned buses. Those wearing masks were not infected. Very interesting study. Came out in February. Yeah. Again, Chinese reported it, and it was, I think it was Wuhan province, which is where all this nightmare, Wuhan city, where all this nightmare came from.
I think it was one of the early studies.
Yeah, very early studies, because no one knew how he'd done it. And what it was air conditioned, but it didn't actually go in a straight line. People behind him didn't get it.
Some people nearby got it. Others who were sat right beside him didn't get it. It was relatively random.
Then he went on another bus, and I think in the first bus he infected 9. He went on another bus and infected, I think it was another 2 or 3. And then some poor soul got on the first bus after he'd left it and got it because it was still floating in the air, and he was,
or it was on the surfaces that were being touched because it had settled from the air.
He was actually sitting at the front of the bus, and this bloke had been sitting at the back, and he got it. Was it because when the bloke left, particles were around there as he left out the door? So, how safe is your school bus? How often are they going to clean it? Some schools say we're bubbling in school transport, others say they're not. Face masks. I do a little demonstration. We're going to have to hopefully. Yes, you can see me here.
Sure we'll have quite the time for that.
I've got to do this because it's necessary for the ADDs.
Okay.
Right, face mask. You have to, if you're going to put it on, then you're going to take it off, and then you're going to throw it away. Each involves washing your hands or using sanitizer. I don't think there's enough soap and water in the schools. I certainly don't think there's enough sanitizer to do that.
You also have the problem of then dry hands because you're washing your hands over and over again all day. Because if the kids are taking their masks off when they're eating, they're having to take it off, find a safe way to handle their food. Then they're having to put it back on again later on in the day.
Right, now this is, I've got to make sure you can see it, so she might have to move the camera. This is a Blue Peter thing, all right?
We'll just lift the camera.
Some children need to be convinced that handling their face mask is not simple, all right? So, I happen to have a pot of blueberry and lavender jam. I do not advise you buying it.
She doesn't like the lavender part.
Vile.
That's the bit that just doesn't
work
for her.
If you can see, can you go down a bit? I am now spreading this on said face mask. Now do this with a jam the kid likes. Right. Okay.
I think that's sufficient, yeah.
Can you see jam? I am now going to pretend I'm putting this on my face.
Okay, so
and I'm now going to take it off. I have disobeyed the rule of only holding it by its straps because I'm in a hurry. Someone's knocked me, but I've managed. I'm now going to close it. Oh, God. I'm now going to close it up.
We've got a little bag.
And I'm going to put it in the bag because there's all these bags you can buy to put it in. Right, that's fine. I've got that on me. Don't know what I'm going to do about that. Do I have a tissue? Yes. Where do I put the tissue?
Except, remember, if we're talking about someone who's having the experience, you wouldn't even be aware that you've just handled the wrong bit.
I am now going to put it back on again because now I've got to go into the corridor or to dinner. So the first time it was my break, or I'd come in through the playground. So now I've got to put it on again. So I get it out.
And the first thing to notice is we've already got it inside.
And it's not that
now.
easy because they're fiddly things and the wind's blowing or whatever. So I'm going to put it on again. All right. Now you can see I've already got stuff on the outside. And I've now, oh God, and the teacher's saying hurry up and So I'm struggling now. I've now got it on my hands again. I've got it on the inside. I've got it on the outside. That's a way to show an ADD child or a young person who's saying, I don't see what's difficult about this, or even a teacher, that this is not straightforward. Let me just clean up the mess I've created. Oh, that isn't transparent. There. Can you grab that? Yep. Right. I've now got sticky hands. So I'm now going to put gloves on, actually to control my mouse, because otherwise I'm going to I'll be throwing something away. I think the camera's just disconnected, so that I can actually use things without getting infected. Right.
It's a new stand, and we're not quite
We
sure
only got
how
the
to
camera
make
this
it
morning
work.
and the stand because I didn't think my camera was going to be good enough on the computer. Okay. I want to make that go forward. It's that one again.
Yes.
Right. Problems with masks. Some children and young people, perhaps the autism OCD, are likely to become very upset if others don't obey the new rules or if masks are worn below the nose. A mask worn below the nose, like so, is no good to anybody. Does nothing.
But something to remember is when you are wearing a mask, you really do have problems when you're doing physical activity. It's harder to breathe through them while doing exercise. So a lot of people, you do notice when they're puffing, they just pull it down. It's that bit of easier breathing in, and they may justify it that they're breathing in through their nose and out through their mouth. And that does make, well, it makes sense for the not breathing out the bad stuff, but you're still
going out the nose. It's still going out the nose anyway.
And partially out the nose, yeah.
The other thing you have to think about is we've done the ADD proving it. Different sorts of masks. Hearing loss, deaf, auditory perception may need teachers to wear masks with clear windows so that they can lip read. All masks are not equal. The bandana ones are useless.
The ones that you just pull up.
The surgical ones are good. The one I showed you earlier. 3 layers, please, of cloth you need to be 85% effective. Face covering exempt. You go. Hang on.
Okay, yeah,
you go to these people. It's called Making Invisible Visible, and it's called Hidden Disabilities. Go to their website. You can get a lanyard and other things that you can show people to say, look, I'm exempt. All right. I'm just going back there because one of the problems with masks is they do reduce sound. Dan, you were saying about Adam doing his driving lessons, he can't hear what the person's saying, especially with windows open. Yeah. Windows are going to be open in schools because they're saying keep your windows open. When it gets cold, windows can't be open, more chance of infection. But when the windows are open, you can hear everything going on. So it makes it more difficult to process sound. So nothing straightforward. Going home, minimizing risk. Now, if you can do all of this, you'll have minimized your risks. Use own transport if possible. You know why, the bus research. Can't take mask off without hand sanitizer. Easier if parent guardian does it and disposes of them into a bag.
So what she's saying there is either the child has to take the mask off, have this hand sanitizer, but then you've got multiple people in the car touching the lid of the hand sanitizer and trying to get that sorted. And it may be simpler if you just have the parent take each of the ones off the ears and then clean their hands.
Yeah, and then everybody cleans their hands because the kids have been, we don't know what they've been near. Don't know how you keep the bottle clean.
Yes, that was the thing. We're not sure about what advice anyone's giving on how you actually keep the bottle itself clean when you've got multiple people using it, or do you have to have a person-specific bottle? So does each child have to have their own bottle that only they use?
We're not thinking of the cost right now. You can make your own with alcohol and aloe vera.
There is guidance.
I've got a recipe, yes,
on
somewhere.
That, yes.
Guidance on the net. A need to train them to clean their hands, sorry, not just for 2 happy birthdays.
It's not,
you know,
the problem is it's not just
about
the
it's not just there, and it's got to do all those bits as well, and your wrists. Once you get home, Guardian cleans equipment. COVID-19 is killed at 60-degree water, so clean with very hot water, lunchbox, pencils, pens, pencil case. Some schools are providing the equipment, so the kids have got it in school and it doesn't move out. Once you arrive home, reduce your possible viral load. Just inside your door, have a space for the removal of clothes, a laundry bag to shove them in, and shoes. Don't shake them out, you're spreading the virus. And a shoe rack to put the shoes on, right? It stays 4 days on floors. We know it travels on the soles of shoes. Not known how long it stays on skin and hair. Once all clothes are collected from adults, put them straight into the washing machine.
It's from the adults
Don't
and
shake
the children and young people.
Yeah, because the adults doing this as well. Don't shake them. Use gloves to handle your kids' clothes, to handle your clothes.
If you can, or wash your hands thoroughly afterwards.
Yeah.
If you want to avoid as much plastic as possible.
If it can't be washed at high temperature, put it in the tumble dryer, because a lot of stuff can't be washed at a high temperature. It can go in the tumble dryer, and the tumble dryer is hot enough to kill it. If you can't wash it, then how about a handheld steamer on it? Yeah, but check the fabric. Do it on a bit you can't see.
And again, this is also about thinking what clothing is worn. So if you're able to choose things like trousers, that sort of thing, make sure you've got clothing that can just be shoved through a washing machine or a tumble dryer. Make it as easy on yourselves as possible.
Yeah, and what I've just been telling you is what a GP, a UK GP is advising, all right? All that stuff above. Shower, include washing hair. Those with dyspraxia often hate having showers because they have sensory sensitivity, and a shower is real. They don't like being in the rain either. But do it with their favourite music on to relax them. Have some stones, crystals. In a minute, you're coming in, Dan, to relax them that are suitable for a bathroom, because you've got to have crystals that are strong enough to cope with water around them. So, minute, Dan, think about what you're going to say. Relaxing activity then. Watch something funny, as watching humorous things boosts the immune system.
It increases, with respect to epigenetics, it increases the genes activations of genes that improve the immune functioning.
Now, you're never going to remember all this. By the door, have a list. Clip art by each thing they're going to do in the order they're going to do it. All right, you might need that in the car to begin with. Yeah, make it easy on everybody. Dan, come on in, and crystals, please.
I think it's another page before that. Check with, it's another page, I believe. Because the other thing is...
Yeah, list by the door.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So, Dan, what we're going to do for relaxing in the shower? We got anything?
Aquamarine would be a great one.
Okay.
Aquamarine has got that energy of letting go.
Is it going to cope with the water?
And absolutely. Anything that is over 6 on the Mohs scale, so your appetites, your quartzes, they're all good. Anything below a 6 on the Mohs scale can either dissolve in water, or the colour can change by being exposed to water over a long period of time. So your calcites, your fluorites, their colour might start to change by being in water or being exposed to a mass amount of water. And then your selenites, your salts, your gypsums, they're going to say goodbye. If you show them water, they're going to go. So anything 6 and above, they're quite good to have in there. Rose quartz is a brilliant one.
Remember, with the quartz, don't shove it on the window ledge where the sun's going to fade it.
Yes. Yeah? Yes.
All the quartzes are like that.
All the quartzes are like that. Absolutely.
So let's go forward. We're getting there. Making the decision. Grab a piece of paper, fold it in 2, plus on one side, minus on the other. This you're going to use for your discussions, for your thinking, even for your dowsing. Yeah? Colour code the things as you write them down. Each person does it. So they're going to write, it's going to be red if they think it's a big risk,
or a big issue,
amber if it's medium, green if it's not a problem. You, your partner, young child, and anybody else involved in this decision making, like granny that might need to be shielded, do it. Think of all the factors you've got to consider. Will they cope with the rigid school environment that we're going to have to put up with? What's the COVID risk? You confident the school's got measures and they're adequate? The lady who spoke about they can't deal with the head lice, maybe not so confident. Will it enable the child, young person, to be happy, reach their potential, needs be met? Are you happy with the curriculum, resources being used? Does anyone at home need to shield? Does Gran take them to school, and is she vulnerable because of age or conditions? Yeah, lots of things to think about. Support if choosing school. You can see I didn't finish this, Crystal. This slide. Rituals can help. You know, you have a pattern of things you do, a meditation perhaps on a Sunday night that you do. You've got to be really careful with rituals though, because autistic spectrum, OCD, some of the dyspraxia, some of the ADD could then get obsessed, and if you don't do it and don't do it exactly right that time and don't do it forever, you're going to have a problem. So maybe you have to think about what you're going to do and say, right, well, we're going to do this sort of activity first, this sort of activity second. Give you a bit of leeway. Crystals, we're thinking a morganite might help.
That's one of my favourite ones, which is the pink version of the same type of thing as emerald.
Now, Dan has got a lovely little webinar that he does on crystals all around the home. So you could ask him to repeat that sometime, because he can tell you all the different ones you can put around the home as they come in the door to just chill, break all that vibe of stress that everybody's had. Colour therapy is good. Addie's really into colour therapy. We've got so many different colours of silk scarves. It's not true. You know, red, ugh. You know, you don't want
increases the adrenaline within
Yeah,
the body,
you don't
which
want
is
it.
good for discussion. It's good if you want to have conversation around the dinner table.
But not for this sort of discussion.
No,
you know, you
no,
want things that are going to
chill out,
greens and blues and teals. Go out into nature. Go out into the garden. You know, feel the flowers. I mean, that's something I love to do. I'm a tree person as well.
It's also some of the substances that are produced by trees and by other plants can boost the immune system.
Yeah, because they all have their own biome, their own bacteria, and it then gets into you, which improves the diversity that you have. And one of the problems when you get an impaired immune system, you have less diversity in the gut biome. And
that's possible in all the biomes. We haven't done enough research to really explore the rest of it.
Elderberry, you can buy elderberry concentrate. It's an antiviral.
And I think it's 10 mil.
Yeah, 10 mil a day for an adult, about 5 for a child.
Be careful not to use it every day, but if you think you're going to be exposed to a significant risk on that day, then drink it beforehand so that it slows the viral reproduction and calms all of that down. The reason you can't do it every day is because the human body actually has its own virome, as well as microbiome that has bacteria. We've got viruses as well that are very important to keeping not just in the gut.
No, yeah, they're
outside
everywhere.
The skin, everything. It's everywhere.
They contribute to the aura, in actual fact, the virome on the skin. Sunlight exposure. As Addie says, you can get an app for this.
You can get an app for it. There are various different ones, and the recommendation that I've read that I'm most partial to, it says 3 times per week, get half your MED, which is the maximum your skin can cope with before it would burn. And that you can work out using the apps, and that it boosts your immune functioning.
Because it increases your vitamin D. All right?
And other things.
And other things.
Are now being seen as much more important than we used to think they were.
Taking vitamin D tablets, supplement doesn't particularly work.
Doesn't do enough.
There's more than one D. And
it's actually separate from that. There's a whole load of other things that are produced in the skin at the same time that send signals to the brain and body. So it's
the vitamin D supplements tend to be D3, so you're missing all the other bit. Online ed. All educational bodies legally banned to support, even when it's online.
Special educational needs.
Yes.
But gaining it can be difficult and stressful. Now that's regardless of whether it's online or whether it's a school that you're going to in person. It can be very challenging going through the different procedures for each individual school. They all have slightly different systems, and some of them are not as good at following the overall guidance as they should be.
And you may not achieve it, either in school or in online. Okay, distance learning. Online, I'm including distance learning though, may not be as flexible as you need.
This is because, again, it is trying to follow set structures. So, again, it does tend to be quite text-focused, and you tend to be doing exams. But that can work for some children who just want the structure, who like it,
Courses are based on guided teaching hours. So a level 1 might be 100 teaching hours or guided hours. And that basically means guided study hours,
It's essentially you've been told to do this amount of work, and this is how long they expect it to take.
Now, the problem is that can require a lot of hours on activities which can be irrelevant. Or you already know how to do it.
They're not always good at targeting those to learning for the subject in hand. Sometimes they are either reinforcements to things that you've already had reinforced, and you really don't need any further information about that, and you're just practicing in a way that isn't actually that helpful.
And that also, if you've got fatigue, if you've got long COVID, if you've got ME, if you're already stressed because you've got somebody ill, etc., puts too much of a burden on you. So as you do then what Addie and I did, we worked out all the bits of her degrees that she didn't need to follow. There was a whole textbook she never read because it had 6 in that module, and we never read the one on China, to be in cities.
I read it afterwards as a casual thing, but it wasn't necessary for any of the assessment purposes.
Only if the activities have to be marked, do them. All the other stuff, literally look at it and say, do I need to, do I not? All right. Also, it's costly.
Yes. Right. Online education, if you're looking at secondary schools, they're not likely to be state schools. They're not going to be ones where it's free education.
The lady who's got them doing it, hang on, the Okadas arrived. Addie will do this for a minute.
Oops. Hang on. And the mouse is going everywhere now.
Yeah, work your way out.
Okay.
We're here really. She's just going to click on the screen again.
And if we go back up to this.
You're going to need those on.
So as we said, it does cost money. With online education, you can actually get it for secondary school, you can get it for college, you can get it for university. So there's a lot of options available, but finding one that you can get a position on the course can be difficult as well. So it's finding what options can be achieved in your circumstances. Now, if we look here, this is the sorts of things you can do. You can Google search online school education to find different ones. And here we have various different ones. We've got Interhigh, we have Valentia Institute, and My Online Schooling. There's all sorts of different things you can go to find out more information about online schooling, and each one will have a different structure that they use. Most will try and stick with the curriculum. You can expect that because they are trying to meet the same obligations that any other school would be trying to meet. What have we got here? It says, enhancing creativity and wellbeing through art-based activities is this particular school, which is the Devon Artist Network. And they run courses, classes, and retreats for children and adults. Now, again, these things can be dovetailed in with home education. If you decide, I actually want to explore this area more and I'm not confident with it, you can bring in an online course. There's all sorts of different ones that you can bring in for all kinds of different subjects now. So, and things like energy medicine. I did a course on energy medicine, which included things like flower essences. It included the impact color has on the biology. So things like using a deep blue color, deep marine blue type color, as an anesthesia to help sedate the brain because it just calms everything down. And we have tip. Always find out as much as possible about the school, its courses, whether they are accredited. This really is important because some schools, they will put up courses that actually don't have any value for when you're trying to move on to the next level of education. Whereas if you've got courses that are accredited and you can say this is a level 1 or this is a level 2 course, it means you can sometimes transfer credit. Other times it's seen as having greater weight when you are trying to get into a school or trying to get into the next stage up of education. The other thing is the cost. Always have to be aware of that because, again, remember, these are not necessarily permanent decisions. All of these decisions can be changed over time. So you may feel we have enough for a year or 2 years for going for an online school, and we're going to give it a term, see how that works, and then see if we want to go either back into school or into a home learning environment. There's always the option to change to a different strategy. So the cost, you don't need to be thinking, is this a cost we can pay for the next 5 years or 10 years? But it's something to keep in mind when you're making the decisions. The amount of study hours needed for each course, sometimes they are absurdly high. You have to do far, far more than you would expect to do, far more than you'd like to do, and it's really putting you under strain. So you really do need to make sure beforehand that you know the pressure it's going to put on you. If you are doing home education using online education as an extra, You want to be thinking, is this actually going to be full-time study on the course that I'm trying to do? Do I have to be working full-time on this? Therefore, I can't do anything else fun. I'm basically solely locked into that energy usage and that time usage. Try to find out reviews of the school. Always look for reviews of everything that you can, but always remember also, you can't necessarily trust the ones on their websites. There are websites you can go to get reviews that are more general, and there are various ones online for that. I take it you put the frozen stuff in the freezer.
That's just what I've done. I've washed my hands
And
as well.
Jan,
No longer have jam.
As we got here, ring them up. Do they sound professional? Do you like the sound of them? When you talk to them about their ethos, what is it they're saying? Because you will be able to get a feel for the types of people there. So if I just move us on to the next one, what have we got here? This is post-16 education. And again, there's various colleges. So you've got Open Study College, Open College of the Arts, UK Open College, open.act.uk, which is I believe the Open University's earliest stuff. It's their lower level stuff. And online providers you can get certificates, diplomas, degrees, bachelors and masters. Now, things like the Open University, you can do lower level things like certificates in higher education, and they can be carried through into your undergraduate degree. So you can try a course, you can do something that's a certificate without feeling the pressure of the higher education, the higher levels of education. And if it goes well, you can say, okay, I'm going to carry that over. I'm going to transfer the credit to a degree and move into that as a longer term solution. And as we've got down here, or I believe that it was here, you can join from 16 years and sometimes younger when it goes to the OU. So you could do a certificate of higher education over a more extended period of time. One of the benefits of some of the online, not all of it, but some of the online, is that you can do it over a much longer period of time. And that can make it a bit easier in the long term, because you don't have the same pressure on you right now to do as much. So you can do a couple years of certificate of higher education, then transfer that credit into a degree, and you start doing intensive work at 19 years old or older still. There isn't the pressure to make the decisions now, but there are lots of options. That's what we're trying to get across here. Now, if you haven't had an assessment for learning difficulties, if you are trying to get Disabled Students Allowance, DSA, which you can get for the degree courses, for some of the diplomas, I believe, DSA?
Yes, yes.
For masters?
As long as it's post 18. I'm not sure what the situation is for 16 to 18.
Okay. But for those qualifications, you can get Disabled Students Allowance if the learner requires additional support. And they provide a free assessment, and they will pay for the assessment. You go to an assessor, sometimes at one of their sites, or you can arrange it yourself. Sometimes you have to negotiate with them a bit at that stage, but you can then get an assessment of the person's needs. That assessment informs the formal assessment of needs report, which lays out what the difficulties are and what support should be put into place, and the DSA then provides it. And that includes equipment such as Drag and Dictate, so that you can reduce the amount of typing or the amount of text construction that needs to be done. You don't have to remember all the spellings. You can remove a whole layer of thought processes there. Mentoring and one-to-one study support. So if the learner hasn't had any form of assessment, when they are reaching the point where they want to start doing formal studies at this level, you can get that free assessment. You can get support for the needs without having to go through a palaver yourself, because you can get it through this structured system. So what's our next one? Tip: don't commit your money until you know exactly what the student will have to do. And this is, do the same research as you would for the schools. Make sure you really know what you're getting at the end. Sometimes people will say that you will be able to get membership of an organisation. You see this with some of the holistic qualifications, but in fact it doesn't lead directly to it. you need to do top up and other things. So it's helpful to speak to the organizations themselves if you're looking to go down that route and you want to know if it actually will give you the result you're looking for, the achievement you're looking for. Beware of modules that require large amounts of study time devoted to activities that are irrelevant or unnecessary, but which have to be handed in and or marked. This is becoming a bigger and bigger issue with some of the more formal things, because
vocational courses are dreadful, absolutely dreadful for it. BTEC.
Oh yeah,
RSA
yeah.
dip. Oh.
Yeah, they pile things on more and more and more, and you just end up exhausted, and you're not learning about the subject that you're interested in. You're not really getting a sense of that. And if you're going to be spending money on a qualification, you want to come away feeling confident in your knowledge of that area. You want to know that you really do understand it. You've got a broad understanding, and it's not just you've done basically the same thing over and over again, or in slightly different ways, just so you could hand it in. So if we move to the next one, accidentally press the button again. My bad.
Home ed. We're there.
Home education. Yes. Research shows that learning at home can have a significant impact and longer term impacts on children in different ways, which include a child's early learning, later achievements, nurture, resilience, well-being, social mobility, and skills for life. And this is from the Review of Learning at Home, which you can find on the Scottish Government website. So home education, it can be very, very rewarding. It can meet all sorts of different needs. And as we say, you know, later achievements, this is about going to university. You've learned the skills to enable you to study at higher levels, because you've had to be independent. You've had to schedule your own time. These are the things that most students find difficult when they go to university. They're not used to having to work out when they're going to study and fit it in, because normally they're all scheduled throughout the school day. And I think that's what you'll have all experienced now. You've got the kids at home, you're not sure when to schedule study in, you're trying to fit things in, but sometimes that'll be easier than other times. And once you've learnt those skills, when you are doing the higher levels of learning, such as university level, those skills carry through and mean that the learners are able to adapt to the new environment of higher ed much more easily.
Can you go back to that one?
Yep.
Mentions later achievements. There's a book that I mentioned earlier, which I'll mention again later, which is called
How Children
Learn at Home. Brilliant book. And I just want to read you just 3 bits. 1953, a journal published the groundbreaking article by 2 people, one of which was James Watson, and their discovery of the double helical structure of the chemicals that make up DNA. He did not attack the learning how to do that, how to create that discovery in a normal way. All right, he didn't sit there with a pen and paper and sort of. And what
he didn't follow the patterns that have been taught to him in his education.
He actually described what he did, and these are some of the things he said. He made it plain that his thinking was not always directed and purposeful. He describes daydreaming about what he wanted to achieve. He put off work. He avoided things that he believed would be too difficult. And he uses the term play to describe the endless fiddling around the problem, and said that that play kept the problem moving. So no matter where he was, it was in the back of his mind, even at the cinema, or even going out socialising. And he says, he makes reference to socially based conversations over meals and drinks. And he later attributed considerable meaning to the periods of doing and achieving nothing. We never have that in our school system. There is never a time to sit.
Just to be clear,
contemplate.
Watson was home educated.
He wasn't home educated. This was the way he said he did it. He wasn't actually home educated, I realised. I thought he was. But that's how he worked, and that is the ideal way for a student in home education to work. Ideal way for most of us to work. I mean, my iPad is full of notes of things. I'm always working on some project or another, and I'm sort of thinking, and this, 1 o'clock at the night, haven't got to sleep yet. Suddenly have a thought, and I've got to write it down. This is what he was doing. Now, another thing that I want to just draw your attention to is a young man, totally child-directed education is Parents didn't say anything about what he had to learn when he had to learn it. He decided to learn all sorts of weird things and wonderful things. Never in any order that you would recognise. He's now in his 2nd year of doing a PhD in aerospace design. Aerospace
he was at the
engineering,
time of publishing.
At the time of the publishing. So it doesn't, if you've got a really bright young person, it doesn't stop them reaching their goals. If you've got somebody who's got SpLDs and is really struggling, you can fit the method of learning, you can fit the resources.
One of the
them.
things that needs to be understood is that learning is not the linear structure that we expect from the school environment.
Which they have to do, usually because just the way the curriculum's designed and all the rest of it. So
Absolutely.
we're not having to go the way it's set.
Learning occurs when the brain is connecting different ideas. It's the neurons gathering together more information, connecting, producing tighter and tighter knots. And the stronger the bonds between the different bits of information, and the more they can bring in additional information, so that you get thicker and thicker nets. That's how learning really works. That's how you are able to transfer your knowledge to different situations, which is the goal, the ideal of learning.
Yeah. Okay, types of home ed. Unstructured and informal, a bit like the bloke who Watson, who discovered DNA. Partially structured, I suppose he could have been that some of the time, and using all source materials. There's some nice materials you can use if you think there's a bit that I'm not happy with, or I want to make sure I've got literacy and numeracy. Nice little series, this CFC I think they're called, or CGF, and you'll see them in bookshops if you want to go into them, but you can also just look at, these are available on Amazon. They do grammar, punctuation, spelling, they do language, English language, they do numeracy for all the different key stages. Nice, I'll show you some pictures later on inside, or I think I've already done so. But nice and easy to use, have things with colouring. There is nothing worse than putting a person in front of work they've got to do that's in black and white. I hate the fact, I used to attend loads of exhibitions and used to exhibit some of the materials that I've designed at big education shows. And I can assure you the stand that was covered in teachers was the one that had workbooks. And there were all these wonderful workbooks for children that had some sort of area of difficulty that they wanted to teach them, I don't know, phonic patterns, whatever. And the covers were in full colour, and the insides, more often than not, were in black and white. And the kid was then going to be thrown this piece of paper. Oh, well, if you filled in that sheet, you'll have covered the phonic AI to say it's A. And that's not the way that I think teaching should be. If you're going to do home education, you at least have a chance to give some nice materials. You can also, if you go to Education Otherwise, on their website, they direct you to a whole load of free materials, etc., etc.
And again, the Facebook groups also discuss the sorts of things they're doing, so you can get lots of.
And they have days out. I don't know when that will be coming to being, but they have days out together.
Days out are viable.
And Somerset used to, notice the word used to arrange a couple of days out a year for students that are being home educated. Again, when that comes back to being, who knows. You can have a tutor for part or all of what you think of the formal elements.
If we just go back to the first bit, we've got unstructured and informal. These are referring to materials. So the unstructured and informal is you don't really have any materials. You're just exploring the world, and like you're learning through exploring the world. The partially structured is you have some books, for example, for subjects that you're not confident at teaching or that you don't want to spend the time teaching. You use a book. You can get educational apps as well, some of which are very useful for maths and things like that to make it fun.
Good stuff for phonics.
Yeah.
You can also use just your living experience. They call it the lived experience. Isn't that a posh way of saying it? And basically you're going shopping. Where did the grapes come from? Where did the bananas come from? What are we going to do about the fact that bananas have actually got a virus and we won't have any about 10 years? Isn't it interesting that the banana plant actually moves across the field? I was amazed at that. It was one of the questions in QI, that they actually move across the field. And you just think, how on earth can that happen? What about cocoa? Can we actually have cocoa that is not affected by war? Because we talk about blood diamonds, you can talk about blood cocoa as well. All sorts of things you can go into.
The next bit here is that you can have the day structured in different ways. So you can have it be completely open, where from the start of the day, the learner does whatever they feel like doing, and that if they want to study or if there's particular things to study, they can do it at any point they want. You can have partially structured day where you say, okay, in the morning, we're going to do a couple hours of you doing these workbooks, or we're going to do some chosen learning, such as doing baking, cooking a family dinner, that sort of thing, and making it into a learning experience. Or you can
make play productive. Say to them, say you want half an hour, you've got to get something done. Maybe you want an hour, you say, right, get out all your Lego, all your other stuff. I want you to create a town on the lounge floor. I nearly broke my neck when my kids did this. And you then get them, once they've created their town, you say, well, what laws do you think they ought to have? You know, which way should the cars go?
This discussion comes from an idea we were discussing earlier, which is how do you keep kids quiet so that you can focus? And this is one of the things where you can say, okay, I want you to sit down, use these things to create a society, and you're going to give it, say, 5 rules, and you're going to, at the end of this next hour and a half, once you've worked out all of this, you're going to come and tell me, and you're going to explain to me why these rules work, what they're supposed to achieve, and that sort of thing. And that can open up all sorts of interesting discussions on the freedom of movement, freedom of rights. What is it you need to...
Have you only got yellow Lego people going into your school? Are we being apartheid here?
There's all sorts of discussions that you can have from that, but you can say, okay, an hour and a half of you doing that, and then come back to me, and that gives you an hour and a half of quiet, and then you've got a small discussion and little bursts of discussion throughout the day. So that sort of structure can make it a bit easier for you to manage. And the other option on this list is a very structured day, which is where you basically say, okay, from the morning, we have breakfast at this time. From this point onwards, you're doing this subject, then this subject, then this subject, and you map the entire day out like a school schedule.
A lot of people who do home ed start that way, and usually within a few weeks, they've gone the other way.
Or over time, they gradually go between
they
different
feel more
options
comfortable, they feel more relaxed, they're less stressed.
And they feel more confident in teaching subjects, because to begin with, you're faced with all these subjects which seem overwhelming, and once you've had 6 months of reading through the boring books, you basically feel, I can teach this. This isn't as complicated as I thought it would be.
Thinking of it in subjects. That's why we offer this school report that we do, because we take what you've been doing and we say, right, that fits there, that fits there, that fits there. And then you can have a school report in a format that the person who comes out would be used to seeing, as in history, geography, IT, etc. Quotes from book, I've just done that bit. The reasons for home educating were actually far, far away when I showed you the March hare and the bullying and that sort of thing. Now, choosing your own resources. I love this. If you look at the 2 maps, you'll see they're very different. The one on the bottom is the one you see in school. Very rarely do you see anything else. This one, it's gone.
You can't click on
this one is called the Peters projection.
The one at the top.
Yeah, the top one. And it's showing the actual real sizes.
Each of these has a different role. The Peters projection shows the ocean sizes. That's what's supposed to be the focus. But the reality is it's very distorted based upon the dominant culture at the time which made the map, which means it's very white-centric.
Yes.
So the white world at the top is very much larger than the other countries.
Bottom.
Whereas if you look at the top picture, you can see that's based on the actual size of the locations. So if you look, Europe is tiny. It's only about a quarter of the size of Africa, whereas in the lower picture it looks almost half the size of Africa.
Yes.
So you can actually get a much stronger sense of the accurate proportions. And these aren't the only maps. There are other maps you can get as well.
There's an upside down one.
There is.
Because Australia got fed up with being at the bottom.
Yeah.
The other thing is, Addie was saying this is to show the oceans. That's because the Mercator map was designed for the explorers when we were colonising everywhere, Portuguese, Spanish, English.
So it was to help you navigate between those locations. But since you're turning a 3D globe into a flat sheet, you have to adjust the sizes of other things, and these maps show different ways you can do that.
Right, we've mentioned Oscar Wilde and we've mentioned Shakespeare. We haven't mentioned any of these, have we?
You haven't.
Right, Shakespeare. There's a strong belief he plagiarised his stories. We're always telling people you shouldn't plagiarise work. How ethical is it to teach his plays as being his? Should we even focus so much on Shakespeare? Yes, there's nice stories, but they're very hard text for a lot of people, especially with language impairment. What could we do instead? Oscar Wilde tends to be taught GCSE and A-level. There's an awful lot children and young people that will be ready for Oscar Wilde and the language of importance of being earnest, or the politics of which one was politics you were talking about?
Oh, I can't remember for life me now. It's something like the ideal husband.
Yes, that's right. They can cope with those concepts. Now, you go into Oscar Wilde, you then go straight to your LGBT, because he was imprisoned, he had 4 years hard labour, because his lover was the son of a lord who was unhappy with him having Oscar Wilde as a lover. In the end, after his imprisonment, he went to Paris and he died there, quite poor, I believe, because his life had really just been ruined. You then go to the changes in the law. So 1960 something, we changed the law and said that it wasn't illegal to be gay. Believe it or not, you could have been a lesbian all the time, because Queen Victoria didn't believe lesbians existed, which is interesting, because there is a theory that Jane Austen might have been, because a lot of women at that time didn't have partners. Battle of Waterloo killed a lot, all the Napoleonic Wars. They were left with no men, so what did they do? So you can explore, you can go wider, yeah? So then you go to the Indian Princess. Now, I happened to have studied the Indian Princess about 10 years ago with a home education student, because we did World War II, and they didn't say in the article that's just come out about her that she was a princess, but she is, and her heritage comes from the continent of India. And she became a spy, came from quite a wealthy family, became a spy, a radio operator, I believe, went over to Europe, Nazis caught her, and she was killed and tortured. Well, tortured and then killed. The reason I'm mentioning her is because either yesterday or the day before, English Heritage announced great acclaim, we are putting a blue plaque on the house where she lived in Bloomsbury. And you think, oh, that's good. And then they say, and it's the first person of Indian heritage in our 150 years, 650 years that we've ever put a plaque up for. And then you think, no wonder people are rioting on the streets. You know, but then you can bring in the diversity, you can bring in why it's needed, why we have to change our attitude, and then you can decide which things in museums should be staying there. Do we return the Elgin marbles? What do we do? What about all the mummies we've got from Peru? We've got a whole load of Inca mummies of children. You know, what do we do with all of these things?
So there's a lot of different topics. What we're trying to say is there's a lot of different topics where you can start in one direction and really spread out and discuss a much broader curriculum than the schools and the teachers are able to discuss.
Right, home education, we've overrun so much, it's not true. Home education information sources, there are books. Remember this wonderful book that we've given you the title of once?
Taken it away now. I've
tucked it down there.
Yeah.
And it's now got a pretty cover. So I looked it up, it's on Amazon. How Children Learn at Home. It's one of the best. There's a lot of dross out there, but that one's a good starting point. And it's also, if you worry about,
we should have had the cover with it.
Yeah,
I'm not sure whether
it's a very pretty cover they've got now. But that's something, you know, if you've got granny not sure about what you're going to be doing, you can say, well, do you want to read a bit of this? Do you want to look at this? And if you have somebody come out from the local authority who really knows nothing about home education, you can say, look, this is a really good book. Do you want to have a look? Educationotherwise.org.uk, research articles. Now, when Addie was doing her research into this for her master's, she did a whole assignment on this, and it was absolutely fascinating. It's Rogoff, isn't it? ROGUOFF.
OFF, yeah.
The University of Dundee did a whole load of research on how effective home education is. You've obviously got social media. Local authority in Somerset, that's where you can find the information. Okay, they include the protocol they use if you choose to go for home education, otherwise known as elective home education. List of home education groups in Somerset, college provision, examination boards, return to mainstream education.
And again, you can see that the local authorities accept that this is normal and that people do go away to home ed and come back, and that they expect this ebb and flow of students.
Now, there used to be, when you went and said, I want to do home ed, you sent in your letter and you saw somebody in about a year's time, and you saw them annually, if you wanted to. That was the system. But then we had all the Birmingham Trojan horse schools and the concern about radicalisation, so all the authorities had to get their act together and have a system. This is the system, and that process is on that website on the Somerset.gov. Each county will have a slightly different system. And it basically says that once you've actually given us the letter and everything, there will be a visit within 3 months from someone just to check that you've got an idea of what you're doing. Yeah. And if they're happy, no problems, off you go. Don't worry about it. And if you do decide to go home ed, we'll help you through that stages so that you can get to that point and be happy, and your child be happy. We can also provide any bits of tutoring that you want. A lot of people worried about sex education. We happen to have a really big interest in that. I was on one of the very first teachers to teach sex education to primary school children when the BBC brought a course out, and I was teaching 7-year-olds. And they actually created their own book with illustrations, and they used to take it home. And I actually had a father at Parents' Day said, "Thank you for that. I've learned a great deal." So, and that was that was a while ago. Early 1970s. And Addie has a huge interest in the neuroscience of relationships, so that people can understand why they behave the way they do, why relationships don't work. So that's super for the older group. And she's also got a big interest in neuroscience of anxiety and explaining
and
to
emotions
kids
in general.
emotions.
Essentially,
Yeah.
it's the whole emotions in general and how they're created in the brain.
Right. Again, piece of paper. You've got to make your decisions. Now, you've got to think of flexibility of curriculum, when to study, how to show knowledge and resources used. We know there's no COVID risk.
But there is the option to have a COVID risk. So if you are studying from home, if you want to go to a museum, you can look at that as an option.
Yeah.
With the things
or
we
you can
discussed
do a
earlier.
virtual tour. A lot of them
You
are doing
can
virtual
do a lot
tours.
of virtual
The
tours.
Smithsonian in America were doing virtual tours before COVID. Can you afford it? Can you afford it in that? Can you afford for some adult to be at home up until they're 14? It doesn't have to be you. It could be a relative. Yeah. So financially, can you afford it? You have to enjoy the company of your child, young person. Can you spare the time? And you don't do a school day. I actually worked it out when I was teaching in primary. I've taught from preschool to university. And when I was in primary, I thought, how much time do I actually teach a child? And I took out the breaks and I took out the lunch breaks. And then you thought of how much time do you have per child? And I think it worked out as 2 minutes per child per hour at most. So it was really very small, because a lot of it is group work and you're praying that they're all paying attention and that you've got them engaged and they're actually listening and they're focusing on what you're doing. I once did a group lesson with some kids and in a primary, and there's one kid I swore he hadn't paid any attention. We were doing tables. And so I said to him, okay, we'll say your whatever it was table, and he just like, said the whole lot. And I thought, oh, well, missed that. I won't write that one, Jan. So you can't always tell whether they're taking it in or not. All right. And that's the problem teachers have. But does home education more closely reflect your life philosophy than school or online? You may feel that spiritual, mind, body, spirit, they're important things to you. School can't do that. Does that matter enough to you to be a really big reason why you want to do it? You've got to
But
think
even
of
looking
reasons.
wider, is it actually teaching the things that you want your child to learn?
Yeah.
It's most school environments, they're not teaching your child how they're going to have to handle their money as adults.
No.
They're not teaching them how to cook real food, good food, and to be able to do things like make dinner party food, feed themselves and a family's worth of
or
food.
even how to twiddle some of the processed food so it looks better.
Yeah. They aren't teaching a whole load of life skills that children need to have. That aren't optional. They aren't ones that you can skip out on.
Balancing budgets.
Yes, absolutely. So there's a whole load of things that you may feel your child should be learning, and you don't necessarily feel that everything that they are committed to in school is of that same value.
School is based primarily, I mean, we didn't have schools until 1870, when the 1870 Education Act made school compulsory. Even in the 1920s, 1930s, well, 1930s, 1940s, you still only went up to the age of 13. School has always been about what do we need for the workplace. It's never been actually about what you as parents want, what actually the children would like. It's all about preparing people for the workplace, because without people working, we don't have an economy, which is why we've got this big thing of trying to get everybody to get back into school because they're worried sick. That's the reality.
If we just go through the last...
So the last one, we're there. We're
No,
there. Hang on, we are. Hang on, but I've just lost it. Hang on. Right, ways to reduce stress and anxiety. You can do yoga. You've got your rose quartz up there. Support via whatever spiritual activities your child, young person accepts. or your partner accepts, you accept. It can be any of them. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
remember, everyone is under strain here. So all of you need whatever you can find to help relax the whole family, because you're all going to be dealing with the anxieties
And
of what's
repeated
going on,
change,
repeated change. You need to take care of yourselves first. Everyone needs to be taking care of themselves, taking care of the whole family, emotionally and spiritually, because this isn't going to get easier quickly.
No.
We're about to go into a winter. They're very concerned about the impact during the winter. So this is going to be a strenuous time, and we all need to really be able to take care of ourselves and to feel that we can make it through this.
Yes. If they're too ill to go outside, or you don't feel safe going to the local park, bring the garden in. We've got a little flat rooftop, and we have a little garden there, so that no matter, even if we're not feeling, if Addie's not feeling well enough, because Addie happens to be ill, to get downstairs, she can see the flowers there. Watch lots of comedies. As Addie said before, they really help the body. They activate all sorts of things within the body system so that you can relax more. Improve sleep. Sleep repairs the body and strengthens the immune system. So again, aromatherapy oils, vanilla, coffee, valerian, place on tissue near the pillow, help induce sleep. And I'm sure that is the end. And Dan, I'm sure you can go in a bit on that bit as well.
And whatever questions have been asked.
Yes, we can have questions, aren't we? Right, come on then, Dan.
That was amazing.
Hang on. I need
Where are the
headphones.
headphones gone? They're not
Hang
over
on,
with me.
we've lost them.
Have you put them there? There we go.
Yes, Dan.
That was amazing. Are you okay for me to remove the screen so we can become
Yeah,
bigger?
that's fine. That's fine. Can you
It's
hear me?
okay. It's okay.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Questions. So, Sarah Matthews.
Absolutely.
That's the problem.
Absolutely.
My heart goes out to teachers. I think they have massive difficulties that they're dealing with. It doesn't help that they have a curriculum that may not work very well. I mean, the numeracy curriculum is awful. They're having to teach far too many things to children, quite often in the curriculum, and there's not enough choice. There's not enough chance to just go off-piste and do things creative. When I was teaching in primary, my kids actually built a pond in the classroom. Now, this is ecologically unsound. We went for a walk. We found a newt and tadpoles. We put them in said pond. We fed them, especially when I found out that said tadpoles were eating the legs of other said tadpoles, not realizing they were carnivorous at that stage. A child in my class managed to steal said newt at one point, but the kids dobbed on him. So when they left school, I said, right, come back in. And eventually I found out who had it and got it back. After they'd all grown up, all these frogs, we took them back to where we got them from. And then we had a raffle because the boys decided that if you turned it upside down, it would make an excellent fort. I was in a very deprived primary school area, and we had a raffle to decide who got the fort. Now, you can't do that in a modern school. I mean, this was huge. I mean, I had a huge room, and we are talking about something that was about 1.5 meters by a meter. I mean, gigantic. We made it out of paper mache, and what we did, you had milk bottles in those days. We had milk bottles in the shape of the thing, and then we built the paper mache round the milk bottles to give us a structure. But you just couldn't do that nowadays, and that's the problem. Teachers are not enabled to be as creative as they can be.
Yep.
As you could see from the one we said about the buses, it was, you know, the bloke that infected all the people. Those who were wearing masks did not contract it. A mask protects you from the person who's got it because it can't get out. Protects the person in the mask from what's trying to come in. 85% only effective, the best ones, unless you have a very, very posh one. Oh,
yeah. This sort of
there
thing
are
is
no
going
words.
to be expected for a long time.
There are no words. If I can just disclose a bit, Adrienne has actually been off school since the age of 9, and she's now in her 30s because she has severe ME. What they wanted to do for her home curriculum with a tutor coming in was maths and English, and I said no. I said she's science, so she's doing science.
For
and
us,
she's
the
music.
problem, the only reason the local authority was involved in my education at all was because at the time my mother didn't feel confident in teaching science and maths.
If I could go back in time, I tell you.
she can. The worst part is she does actually do it now. She does it for all sorts of really complex levels. She's supporting students at master's level.
At the moment, I'm
stuff.
supporting a student who's doing a master's degree in neuroscience and applied psychology. I have learned so much about a huge range of things.
But at the time, she didn't feel confident. And that was the sole reason that I had any school involvement. And the truth is, we both actually regret that. Yeah. We regret that we didn't just stay at home and her buy me books. Because I was happy to read the books. I was happy to watch the Open University documentary.
She was watching Open University.
I loved it.
She was watching Open University at the age of 5. You know, she was
loved it
so young. Started talking at the age of 5 months. Yeah, I mean, just unbelievable. But school really couldn't cater. Right, my son Emmy has had any education. Talk to us, right? The stuff I designed for Falcon will help.
One of the objectives with Falcon was to help support learners so that they could get to the point where they were able to engage in learning activities without it being necessarily structured activities, but it could be watching shows and then discussing afterwards what they'd learned from the shows about social behaviors. You know, it doesn't have to be educational things, strictly educational.
Very, very gentle. We called it the Magellan Project. We had 10, 12 people in it, and everybody said that they'd really progressed. One of them had, I think she was a young teenager, and she'd actually been semi-comatose for 3 years with ME. And this was her first try of doing anything. Very, very gentle. Tiny, tiny, tiny steps. No pressure. No, you've got it right, you've got it wrong. Nothing like that.
Just discussion,
gentle.
Different ways of exploring things so it's not demanding. It's absolutely those sorts of things.
There are some Chimes Trust is actually run by somebody who used to be a head teacher in a local authority. They recommend their satellite school, which can work for some people. It's an online thing. It can work for some people. Look at all the sources for advice. You have to be very careful with some of it, because some of it is actually not Chimes Trust, but some of the ME stuff is actually funded by government, and so it's the government viewpoint they want to push, which is not the one that's particularly safe for children all the time when they've got 2 children, and it's been used for support of education. That's been, oh yes, oh yes. You're lucky you've managed to get some educationally. The medical is so much of what's happening has been wrong for a long, long time. What COVID is doing is allowing people to reflect, to decide where they want to go, how they want to go forward. All you can do is make the decision that feels right for you and your family. There is no right, there is no wrong. Nothing is set in stone. Yeah? If your kids get on, bring them out if you want to. You may find one wants to go in, 2 don't want to. Do it that way. Other people have done that. If you read that book, you'll find they've done that. I must have a drink. I don't know what I've done with the cup.
The cup is on the floor.
The cup's on the floor with the half of the water. So just hang on a second.
And my foot. That's also where the water is. Yeah.
Minor detail. Minor detail. So, yeah, do what feels best for you. Your problems can come if your partner disagrees. Specific language difficulties in SAN are notorious for breaking up families. One partner or the other finds it just so difficult to keep on fighting. If it's it won't be of any comfort to you, but I had 26 years of fighting with Adrienne. School, never went to college, went straight to uni young.
Remember, with the OU, you can go without any prior qualifications. So you don't have to jump through any of the earlier hoops at all. You can literally skip straight to that stage. So I went to the OU and started a degree with only a
double science GCSE. That was it.
And that I wasn't even able to finish. I had to leave early because I just wasn't well enough at that point.
Completely relapsed.
So I didn't even have the full scoring for that. But
apparently schools don't have to teach sex ed, so some schools do and some don't. Big issue. I happen to think sex ed and the relationship
education. Yes, that's the bit that's being brought out more and more now, because it's about more than just sex that they're having to
It also has to be about more than heterosexual sex.
And it has to cover more diverse issues.
If we're going to be absolutely perfectly frank here, I've taught college as well as everything else, and my students knew I could talk hand over donkey. You've guessed this by now. And I used to have some of my girls come up to me and say, how can I stop sex hurting? Because they had boyfriends who had no idea. And I actually had to teach them about foreplay and things about witch hazels, stop you being sore, this sort of thing. We need basic stuff taught. We need our young men who are gay or bi or pan, whatever, to know safe ways of having sex for males. And it's not just all, to put it absolutely frankly, it's not all about anal penetration. There are other ways. You know, there's a whole lot that young men, older men, do together. But
there's also the same issue arises with lesbians or women who are gender curious. And also bi-curious. There's so many different variations now. You've got to even discuss all the different terms. Because you can't expect people to just know what all these different words mean.
He and she may not be appropriate. It may be they. You know, there's a whole. We belong to a board games club whenever we can get out to, which is not a long time, for a long time. And we happen to have in that games club a whole lot of people on the autistic spectrum, B, a whole lot of people that are sexual identity different, and we've got everything.
Sexual orientation or gender identity or both,
and teenagers upwards, and it's very, very I mean, what you learn is fascinating, but it also draws your attention to the self-worth issues, the gaping holes in education, the way people are treated, their expectation that they're not going to be treated well, etc., etc., etc. So gosh, it really is 50-50 and depends on every
depends on every child. And on the whole family. It's about so many different people. All these decisions that are being made, they're never as simple as people like to pretend. You know, it's just a simple decision. Do you send the kids to school or not?
Thank you, Louise.
In reality, there are so many different factors everyone has to think about right now. And it's a lot of pressure. And it's actually really hard that it's all been put on people so fast, because we haven't had a big build-up of saying, okay, we're going to structure everything this way. You're going to have these online tutorials in how you're going to behave when you come back to school, the sorts of things you need to think about.
Some schools have done that. It could have changed with the advice that came out yesterday.
Crazy. Thank you so much.
Sorry, we rushed through a few bits there.
Hey, you know, if people are asking questions, and I know that you have reached out and have given food for thought to some people on what to do, and that was the whole idea of tonight. So as long as you've reached out to some, the job is done. Well done, and thank you so much, guys. It has been it's been so interesting, absolutely eye-opening. Again,
I'd just like to say, you know, whatever decisions people make, there is no judgment for people who decide to send the kids to school or keep them home or do online. There is no judgment for anyone here. This really is not a situation where you can have judgment, because everyone's experiences are so different. Everyone's situations are so different right now, and they're having to face so many different things. So this really is whatever feels right for you and your family, go with it. If you find it doesn't work, know there are other options. You don't have to commit to that forever. There are so many other options. Don't worry if it doesn't work out the way you hoped. Just trust that you'll find the way in the end to the the lifestyle that works for you and your family.
Absolutely. And Louise and her husband Daniel, they are also on Oasis, so you might have seen them on the Oasis weekend.
Yes, the name's familiar with the Dan added to it. Yes, Daniel.
So absolutely link up if anybody needs any help. I mean, these videos, they all get stored on our YouTube channel, so you can always go back to them for resources. But again, link in with Jan and Addie. When Jan, we did the test run this afternoon about it, literally, and like what you said, Addie, about not passing judgment. The way that this has been constructed, I have loved, because we're not saying take them to school. We're not saying keep them at home. We are giving the choice. And I think you guys have explained that so well, that you have given these guys a choice. And that is what is really important, is that we are entitled to a choice. We have a choice. It's now time for us to get a pen and paper and work out what choice is best for us. I'm a dad. We've got 11-year-old downstairs. You know, we've got a choice. Before this happened, our son, you know, his school reports reflected like mine, easily distracted, needs to concentrate more. If he worked hard, he would get those grades. Since he's been at home and working, he's gone to the top of the class. Now, he is 11, so when he goes back, he will be going to high school, which we're happy for him to do, because we want to monitor to see how his grades are doing. And he's asked that he would like to go. So we're going to do that. But if we start getting the reports of he is he's easily distracted, or he's doing this and he needs to concentrate, then we know by you two that there is a choice of us saying, okay, let's put him back into home and see how this works out for him. So thank you so much. And yeah, do get in touch with Elaine Fenton. Do get in touch with the Oasis team. I mean, I'm part of the admin there, and I think that there is an evening on there that you guys can put this to. You've got it all here, and I think it's valuable, because there is spirituality that can be thread through, but well-being, and that is key. That's the most important thing, is well-being. And you know, through this crisis, we've clapped for the NHS. I think it's time we clapped for the children. I think we need to look at them and go, wow, you know, I don't think I would have coped with this as well as what my son is doing. He's just incredible. And we do need to realise that they're not going to understand why they can't play with their friends. They can't understand why they can't go to the zoo because it's a school holidays, why they can't go here, why they can't go there. It's, you know, it's like, what? You know, whoa, this is like worse than being grounded, you know?
And doing a curriculum that's only maths and literacy is going to be dreadful for a lot of them. If there's dyslexia, if there's language impairment, ADD, so many of them will find it
I wouldn't.
Well, the teachers are going to find it impossible. Yeah. How do the teachers keep kids focused on maths day after day after day? I don't envy any teacher who's got to try and keep the kids focused on subjects which most kids really would rather have only tiny, tiny windows and then a break.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, the big problem is there is no way they can catch up with our fantastically huge curriculum. There's no way they can catch up.
Especially if there's going to be temporary lockdowns in some areas. Some kids, maybe the whole year gets pushed out of school.
Who
How do you
misses what?
keep up with those
how do you know who's missed what?
You could be in your primary school at the age of 18.
It's an incredibly unsettling time. It's a tsunami of chaos.
Absolutely.
And all we can do is try and keep our heads above water. Those of us who have a spiritual mind, body, spirit, go with that. Use that as a support mechanism for those we love and those we care about and ourselves.
Just as a side note to that, spirituality has been connected with improved outcomes when there are medical problems. So feeling that there is
Christianity,
any spirituality, feeling that there are higher powers, feeling that there are other support structures, that it's not just you alone having to do things.
There's been a lot of research
really does help with medical outcomes in and of itself. So this is healing in and of itself.
And no, we're not saying it will cure COVID.
No.
We're just saying this is the support. This can help. what it does, obviously, is it helps you relax and helps you then have an immune system that works better.
Yes, essentially, it helps you feel like it takes some of the weight off of you individually having to deal with everything by yourself and facing it all by yourself, because you know there are other powers, other forces that you can trust to be a part of your life.
I mean, they actually found that group praying improves outcomes.
Yes.
Yeah, just a group of people praying against spirituality, whatever.
But again, it helps reduce stress. It helps make people feel.
But they also did some research, and I believe even those who didn't know they were being prayed for were helped. So there you go.
But again, there's so much complex things that we don't understand, including about the aura and how we affect other people through our positive and negative expressions. And yet we know more about things like water and the impact on water of language. I mean, that's one of the things.
80% of water
that I'm reading upstairs about that. So
it's been lovely doing it. Thank you for inviting us,
ladies. Thank you so much for coming on. It's needed. It's been felt. And yeah, I'm going to let you shoot off so you can enjoy the rest of your evening. If I feel the calling, if I feel that we need to have a revise, I would love to have you guys back on for a revised towards Christmas or looking into the new year. But I'll be in touch with you and look forward to seeing you soon. Ladies, good night. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Ah, that was brilliant. I absolutely loved that. So tomorrow morning, I will be going live at 11 on Instagram to help those guys to do a communal altar grid for the full moon. The full moon is coming up next week. So at 11 o'clock, I'll be going on live for an hour. So if you are on Instagram and you wish to take part, jump on. You can either bring a word that I could put into the altar pot, or you could bring a word that I can bring in a crystal for and place that crystal on the altar. Or if you know your crystals, mention a crystal. If I've got it, it'll go on there. We do this on Facebook. We've done it since the beginning of lockdown, and it's one of my favorite lives to do, where we all come together and create something to honor the full moon. We do it on the new moon, and we do it on the Sabbats as well. We always do it a couple of days beforehand to give people chance to get inspiration or to take parts away that resonate with them, and then they can replicate that in their own home. If you aren't on Instagram, don't fret, because tomorrow night at 6:30, we'll be doing this bigger style because it's quite popular. We do love it. We get a good communal response from this. So on Facebook, we'll be going live at 6:30, and we'll be doing the same again. Next week, next Monday night, I'll be doing my live card readings. So if you'd like a little guidance throughout the week, I will pull you a crystal card and an animal card for a little bit of guidance. Wednesday, we will have our special guest again, and that will be Maureen Rolls. She's the animal communicator. So I'm going to be having a chat with her about her work, her past, and what the future has in store for her with workshops, etc. So if working with the animal energy, wanting to communicate with animals is something you're interested in, then jump on board on Wednesday. Okay. Tomorrow I will be doing a post on Facebook and Instagram, letting everyone know where I'm going to be throughout that week. And we've also got our workshop next weekend as well. It's a kind of magic, where we're going to be connecting with 6 stones. That's an online Zoom workshop. So look on our events page on our business page to find out more details with that, and let me know as soon as possible, because we do need to send those crystals out to you. You get 6 tumbles. Okay. So Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I know it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it was important, and I'm so glad that people have jumped on board and people have been engaging in what is an interesting subject. Those ladies really know their thing, and I would love to have them back again. Absolutely magical. So from me, it's a good night, and see you tomorrow morning or tomorrow night. Okay. Good night. Oh, no problem, man. I am busy. Busy bee. See you all soon.